The economy is always listed as the most important subject for many voters. If you were in Congress, what would you do to try to improve the economy? And what could you do as a congressional representative to ensure that people in the first district have access to plentiful, good-paying jobs?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As far as the economy goes, right now with COVID and the shutdown, we're in a funny time that there's been these non-market forces that have hampered the economy. So I think first and foremost we need to work to get the economy open back up, and I think there's a bunch of pent-up demand right now. I think the sooner we get the economy opened up, it's gonna boom. I do think that we have a great opportunity to see a V-shaped recovery in what we're doing. In the longer term, we need to get the government out of people's way. The government there's too much red tape, there's too much regulation. If you want to start a business, if you want to really do anything, the government seems to go out of its way to stop you from doing it. And so I think that's job number one, or that will be a primary focus of mine, is finding ways to unshackle the people so that they can get up and run. And I think there's a lot of room for that. There's a lot of room to do that. And I think by doing that, we'll get the economy back. We'll get it going.
And what about within the district?
Within the district, more of the same. It's focusing on where, especially at the federal level, there's at the local level, what the local mayors and what the local boards do. They're managing their constituents, the best that they see fit. I think at the national level or at the federal level, we need to stay out of their way as much as we can, and help where it's necessary, but really pull back and let the economy go. So.
What is the best way legislatively to prevent gun violence, specifically school shootings and mass shootings?
That's a good question. Preventing gun violence involves mental health issues. I think we need to focus on making sure that people who have mental health issues have access to treat those issues. I think most gun violence stems from that. Most violence in general stems from that. And so I would put more resources into the mental health portion of our society. I think it's something that's been neglected for a long time now. When I was growing up, there was actually a place for people with mental health issues to go and to be treated. Those places have largely been torn down now, and there's been stigmas applied to them, and I think it's led to a lot of the poverty and violence that you do see. And so that's where I would go with it.
What is your plan for fixing America's immigration problem?
So first and foremost, we need to help Trump build the wall. I think that's we got to secure our borders. As a country, we have a right to know who's coming into our country, what they're bringing into our country, and how long they plan to stay in our country. And we have a right to regulate who does get to come into our country. These are, I don't know why it's a controversial issue, but it's turned into a controversial issue. You're the politically correct left will call you a racist if you dare to say that, but it's the truth. So that's first and foremost. I do think there's room for immigration. I think that America's founded on immigration. I think it's an important part of our culture and of our economy, but it needs to be regulated, and we need to know who's coming in. And so that's where we'd start, and that's where I'd head towards it.
How important is it to not increase the national debt and to balance the budget annually?
Yeah, I think it's terribly important. I believe it's probably one of the greatest national defense issues that we face. It's putting our country in peril, the amount of debt that we have and the interest on the debt that we're going to be paying, or that we are paying, but I don't remember the latest statistic, but I think within 5 or 6 years, the interest payments alone on the debt are going to exceed, what we're taking in taxes. So, and the other problem with national debt is it's a tax on our future generations. Those bills need to be paid. They're not just pretend bills. It's not just a pretend, we're not just writing an IOU that never needs to be paid. And so when I as a father go into debt, I'm passing that debt on to my children and to my grandchildren, and that's a moral sin, and it's an economic sin, and so we need to figure out a way to curtail our spending, and that's going to require some tough decisions. It's going to require some diligent oversight. Some of it I think you can be found in efficiencies. Some of it, we got to look at it as a country and say, this isn't something that we need to or should be paying for, and you got to be willing to say no sometimes. But yeah, no, the debt is a huge national security issue, and it's one that we need to address. And I do think we need to balance the budget, obviously.
What, if anything, do you think President Trump could have done better in his handling of COVID-19?
I applaud President Trump in his handling. He took the bold step of shutting down flights from China very early on, and he was vilified in the media for it. He was called a xenophobe, a racist, and I mean Pelosi, even held rallies in the local Chinese community, vilifying President Trump over his decision to do it, and I believe that saved countless lives. That early action made a huge difference. COVID has been a challenge. It's been a challenge as a pathologist, I'm trained in virology and I'm trained in epidemiology. Actually, in my training, I spent time in a virology lab growing viruses and cell culture. So I know a thing or two about the disease, and I know a thing or two about what's going on. And even with that high level of training, the information is coming at us so fast, and it's been so politicized, and the data has been tainted, by these political influences, that it's hard to know the truth of what's going on. And I believe President Trump has been doing his best, and I believe he's been doing a good job at handling this massive information that's hitting him, and trying to protect our society to the best that he can. So looking back, 2020, hindsight's 2020. I can't Monday morning quarterback him on this. I think he did a great job. I really do, and I think I would hope that I have the same courage to do the same as what he's done in the process.
Do you believe climate change is real, and if so, what do you think is the best approach to combat it?
That's a good question. So the climate's always changing. To call something climate change, the climate's been changing since the planet first formed 4.6 billion years ago. The political issue of climate change, I think, is politically driven. I think there's an agenda. I think there are people who are using it as a way to get power, as a way to get money, and that I have a real problem with. I think that, God left us this planet to be good stewards, and I think that we need to be good stewards of the planet, and we should be good stewards of the planet. I don't think that it should have been turned into this political issue that it is, and it's a government overreach largely. So I do think that we need to be mindful. We need to you should leave the place better than you left it, as a general rule. You shouldn't leave your trash everywhere. You shouldn't, if you got something that is polluting the world around you, do something about it, fix it. I don't think that we need to be part of the Paris Accord Treaty. I don't think that we need to ruin the world's economy over this. I think there are solutions that make sense that you can do on a regular basis. But the climate's going to change. The climate's always been changing, and the wonderful thing about human beings is we adapt. We adapt better than any species has ever adapted before, and we will adapt to this. And so will the planet. So,
if elected to Congress, what would you do to address the racial tension that's evident in recent protests, and how would you try to improve race relations in this district?
I think that's probably one of the biggest issues facing us right now, and that's part of my message that political correctness is a cancer. I think it's truly tearing our society apart at the fabric. There are people in this world, particularly the Democratic Party, but there are people in this world that want to use political correctness and race and identity politics as a way to control thought, to control speech, and ultimately to gain power and to gain influence. And I think that's a large root of the problem that we have today. And we need people who will stand up and say no to that and put the focus back where the focus needs to be. We need to have real conversations. We need to understand each other. We need to stop being jerks to each other. It sounds silly, but love your neighbor as yourself. Follow the golden rule. More racism isn't solved by more racism. Racism is solved when we stop being racists, and that's what we need to do. And it's clearly not going to be an easy fight, because people have made it into this power grab, and they've got their vested interest into keeping the issue going and into propagating it. But when I'm up there, that's what I'll do. I'll stand up and I'll be that lightning rod. I've got strong shoulders. I'll be able to take it.
Do you support a regional economic development effort that could involve merging economic development organizations and chambers of commerce, at the very least in the Tri-Cities? And if so, what role could a congressperson take in that?
Can you elaborate on that question further?
There's been conversations surrounding merging the main economic development entity in Sullivan County and that in Washington County. And so that there's a talk of regionalism here in the Tri-Cities.
Yeah. So that sounds like I believe local problems need to be solved locally. I think that the federal government has its role, local governments have their role. I'm not sure that's an issue that needs a lot of federal involvement. I think if the local entities decide that it's better for them to merge, and they've got support of the community when they do it, then that's great. Let's do that. I think if when they look at the issue and they decide, well, it's probably not good to do, well, that's great. That's their decision to make, and it should not be influenced by Washington. You shouldn't have some large grant coming down from Washington trying to push one way or the other. You shouldn't have some large incentive or anytime those things happen, there's a power broker at play and somebody trying to gain power. I won't be that person. I won't be that power broker. This is a local issue. It needs to be decided locally. So that's my general take on it.
Is there any approach that President Trump has taken to his job that you would have done differently? And if so, describe that.
Yeah. I wish there would be a little bit more of an emphasis on spending. And once again, I don't want to Monday morning quarterback the president, because he's had. I don't know how that man gets up every day and puts a smile on his face. He's had one of the toughest roads to hoe that I've ever seen of any president. So, to be critical of what he's done retrospectively, it's almost insincere, and so I don't want to sound that way. But I do think that we're spending too much money. I do think that we need to curtail our spending and watch out for the future generations, because where we're going right now is not sustainable in the long term. And I'm hopeful that during his next phase of the presidency, after he wins re-election, that'll be more of an emphasis, and I'll definitely be there helping him in that process.
Okay, so last question. This is the moment for you to speak directly to voters. What makes you the best person to represent them?
Yeah, I ask myself this question every day when I get up, because I think running for any political office, you need to know why you're doing it. Otherwise, it's insincere. I think you need to earn the right to run. I don't think political office is owed to anybody. I don't think just because your name happens to be Kennedy, or you happen to have been born with $1 billion, or any of these other reasons that you are suddenly owed the right to be a leader in this world and hold any of these offices. I think you need to earn the right to run. I've spent my life trying to earn that right. I'm hopeful that the public will see that, and we'll find out, at the end of the election whether or not they agree that I've earned the right or not. But I'm an outsider. I'm not a politician. I've never run for anything before. I've worked everything that I have in my life. I've worked very hard for. I took out my first business loan when I was still in high school. Hired my first employee when I was 21. I've started multiple businesses, successful businesses throughout my life. I've treated hundreds of thousands of patients. I'm a healer. I'm an entrepreneur. I bring a lot of unique skill sets to the table. And at the end of the day, how I've gotten to where I'm at in my life is I solve problems, I see objectives, I go towards the objectives, and I solve the problems that are in the way. I think we need people like that up in Washington who can, when given an honest dilemma, can come up with an honest solution to that dilemma. And I think that's sorely lacking right now. There's very few people up there that are doing that. And that's part of the reason why I'm running. I mean, that's part of what got me out from underneath my microscope to throw my hat in the ring. And so that's why hopefully the people of East Tennessee, will see that as well. So,
Josh Gapp, thank you for being with us today, and hope you have a good rest of your day and rest of the week.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.